Pokemon fangames are beautiful because they allow fans to bring to life their dreams, whether it be improved gameplay, beautiful stories, or even new Pokemon designs and variants. Very few, however, manage all of these, as it's frankly very hard to make a game, let alone a fan game with monetary and time constraints. But the ones that do manage it become legends. Dashertheruler, and today I'm talking about Pokemon Reborn, a game that truly earns its name by reimagining all of what makes Pokemon good and improving it drastically. It does this and more, packaging it in a mature, dark storyline that still manages to have a ton of fun. But how does it do all these things at once? Well, let's get into it. The gameplay is mostly traditional Pokemon combat, but heavily improved with new unique mechanics and much more challenging battles. Each gym has a full team of 6 Pokemon, even the first, and these aren't just normal gyms, they're well thought out, strong teams, and they use multiple of Reborn's mechanics to challenge both your team and your skill at battles, making them exciting and very different to normal mainline Pokemon games. There's also a large range of battle variety with doubles and single battles and even 2v1 battles where you have to beat 2 enemy teams at once. And in spite of each battle being handcrafted and super well thought out, the game still manages a ton of them, leading to a jam-packed main story and exceptional post-game that always feels fresh due to Reborn's mechanics. The most prolific mechanic is the field effects, which are similar to typical Pokemon terrains like grassy terrain, for example. However, they're made actually interesting by having effects on the battle that completely change how you interact and choose your Pokemon to send out, compared to just healing everyone for a bit of health each turn like grassy terrain does. One example of the many fields is the Cave Field, a very simple field that happens in, well, cave. This move buffs rock-type moves by 1.5 times because, yeah, rocks in a cave, fair enough. It also makes sound-based moves like Boom Burst do 1.5 times damage because it's echoing, which is pretty fun. It also nerfs flying moves by 50% that don't make contact, as I guess there's less wind, and lets ground-type moves hit flying types because, well, there's ground above them. Because of this, the matchup between flying and ground types gets completely switched on its head, and suddenly rock types are actually looking pretty good. But that's not where the effect ends. Many specific moves are buffed and nerfed by their own amount, usually on top of the general scalings, and here Rock Tomb specifically has a 50% power buff, likely because the rocks would be coming from the cave ceiling, so it's a lot better. But the effects don't just end with attack buffs and nerfs. There's also unique effects like where if you use a set of moves like Earthquake or Bulldoze twice in a row, the cave ceiling will collapse, fainting every Pokemon unless it has certain traits like it's in Dig or has Rock Head, which can lead to some crazy combos for fight. You also get seeds which work in different fields and are consumables that have an effect depending on the field. In this case, the Telluric seed raises defense but damages you with the stealth rock damage. And finally, you can transition or create this field in a variety of ways, letting you change up the terrain mid-battle, opening up many insane combos and making moves that in the past may be pretty useless as they do less damage, suddenly have utility of changing the terrain to benefit your team. Now, that was a lot, though the game does spoon feed you the different fields, and a lot of battles initially won't even have a field, so it's not super overwhelming as, well, frankly, since the game has 37 different fields, if you had to learn them all immediately, it'd just be terrible. Like if you were trapped in an editing prison or something and forced to ask the viewer to like and subscribe to the channel, when all you really need is a hug and water because you've been dehydrated in the unair-conditioned depths and have been taking too long so your boss begins pouring lava into the vents, so like and subscribe anyways. You can always check the wiki or your Pokédex, as over the course of a run you'll find special field effect readouts in special Pokeballs that unlock information about them to read in-game. Each gym uses a different field effect and builds their team around it with competitive level itemization and EVs to be as strong as possible, so they often use specific seeds and also moves that are buffed a lot in their field, forcing you to design your team with the gym leader in mind to either exploit their field and use it against them, or destroy/transform their field to ruin their gameplay. And since even the first gym is like this, you're going to have to start taking advantage of resources given to you immediately to get a strong team. But don't worry, it's definitely doable as there are tons of rewards for talking to mans, which I think is a boom. You can get hella cool and strong Pokemon for just interacting with people and completing side plots, which are fun and interesting, though I'll get more into that later. Most gyms also have some fun puzzle or mechanic, though these get a lot better later on in the game, with some late game puzzles being really cool, like this one where you're basically defending your pile of gold from a bunch of dragons attacking you. Though I would mention, since the game does have a speed up button, so you can get through battles and move around faster, which is pretty nice, it's Alt, you will probably use this most of the time, but specifically against most of these minigames, you may need to turn it off, as otherwise stuff may be happening way too fast on screen. Like, I kind of lost that dragon minigame the first time because all of them were just going so fast. But if you really need more help, the Pokemon Reborn Reddit has tons of advice. Plus there's Reborn forums where people love helping and probably have given help already for whatever gym or challenge you're on. Not only are the battles extremely fun and challenging, you get a lot of them as Pokemon Reborn has 18 gyms, one for each type. Though don't get discouraged by the length of the game. Even though it is fairly long, there's a really beautiful story and tons of novelty going on, making it not just feel like grinding through gym after gym after gym, though I'll talk a bit more about the story later as that's really exciting. Also, as a side note, you get a couple really epic boss-like fights against supercharged Pokemon, which I won't fully explain right here since it kind of spoils the plot, but I just know they're hard as hell and incredibly sick to see, especially since they do both crazy stuff in and outside of battle. You probably noticed this in the clips, but the UI is super good for battles, where you can see the current buffs and debuffs to everyone's stats, making everything super clear. And also you get access to things like Z-moves and Megas, which spice up every battle, as honestly, I didn't use Z-moves much before Reborn, but I've used them so much in this game. Now though, you may still be concerned there may be grinding and tedium as well. 18 gyms is a lot, and Pokemon XP curves are notoriously brutal when you get to higher levels, especially if you're trying to train specific Pokemon for specific gyms, as you'll probably end up doing. But don't fear, Pokemon Reborn has tons of quality of life for this that frankly makes the game incredibly smooth. See, at the start of the game you can input passwords to modify the experience. These passwords have tons of effects between quality of life, such as HMs being more convenient, and straight up chaos like full randomizers or monotype runs where you can only encounter certain types of Pokemon. Here are a couple I recommend and personally use because they provide really nice quality of life, especially given the length and difficulty of the game. Those are the ones I recommend, but there are tons of other ones, like if you want to do a Nuzlocke, have only one type of encounter type, randomize enemies, or even do things like make it so you can pick any starter for your first Pokemon instead of the normal Reborn starter choice, which is any of all the generation starters except Scarlet and Violet. One last thing on what makes the gameplay so good is the custom AI made by the team, which is crazy complex and explained in this dev post if you want to know more. But basically, the AI is smart, it'll make good choices, and so it actually feels like you're playing against a living, breathing trainer as opposed to a bot that is really easily manipulated. Obviously, you can still predict the enemy as they aren't going to predict you predicting them, I don't think at least, as that'd be kind of crazy. But they do pose a major challenge, improving the game drastically. But with that, you should now understand what makes Pokemon Reborn's combat and gameplay so good. With so many field effects, new move utility, and easy access to trying team combinations, it becomes a big blast, especially given that you'll have to use these strategies to defeat the difficult opponents. But good gameplay without a nice world and story to accompany it can be kinda dull and boring. So how good really is the story? Well, let's get into it. For context though, real quick, I'm going to avoid spoilers as much as I can, but I do intend to do a plot analysis of a kind of side plot character I thought was really interesting in another video, so if you want to see that, you should check it out. It'll hopefully be done in a week or so, and once it's done, it'll be linked in the description. First though, the game does have some sensitive topics that I'll show on screen, so if these are very triggering for you, just be aware of that. Though I think generally most people will be fine as nothing's too extreme, especially not visually due to, well, the classic Pokemon art style. Anyways, the basic rundown is you come into Reborn City and are taking on the gym challenge, but also there's a criminal organization. So it sounds like basic Pokemon stuff, but without spoiling anything, it is a lot different. Just, I'd have to spoil it to explain why. But anyways, what I think really makes it stand out is one, the story is a lot darker and takes on themes that honestly make sense to occur if this were to happen IRL. And two, the game departs from the mainline games in the sense that your actions and choices actually affect not only your ending, but individual story events and how other characters think of you, making runs very dependent on your choices and also on your approach to some battles that affect the story. And the best part is, there's pretty much a perfectly spoiler-blocked post on the Pokemon Reborn Reddit that states all the most important story things and how to get different endings without spoiling them. It's actually so shockingly well done. I used it to get the bad R determination path, and now I intend to try out the good path, though neither path is objectively good or bad. The post kind of explains them without spoiling, which is high-key really crazy, and thank goodness they did this. But yeah, even though you can use that guide to tell you the overarching plot stuff, each character has different opinions of you, and there's other more minor events that aren't listed that will vary depending on your choices, so you won't just be having a guide play the game for you even if you use that guide. It just helps you make sure you get the ending you're going for. And also, the side plots and occurrences in the story are so engrossing. You're not just going from point A, your first gym, to point B, the Pokemon champion. You're living in this world, and the occurrences in the story drastically affect the gym challenge, making it incredibly interesting, and in spite of following the standard Pokemon formula, it feels completely different. Especially given how in-depth your relationships with each character is, and the harshness of their lives in the brutal city, and how it pretty directly affects them. They're also just really interesting characters and a huge cast, which helps given how long the game is. It'd be pretty boring if it was just your rivals and the gym leaders, but so many intersecting lives come together, and each responds to the other in a believable manner, making it feel like they're not just disjointed plot points serving to spice up the game, but rather a fleshed out beings that live and breathe in this world. The writing's also just very good. It's hard for me to explain how without spoilers, but so many moments trigger such an emotional response just by being written well, and so many trigger laughs and enjoyment just by giving each character their own personality, which sometimes are very amusing. And since there's so many and they're well proportioned, it's hard to get sick of one even if you don't like them, because they don't overly use any character, as can happen in many fan games and mainline Pokemon games. Additionally, due to the length of the game, they really can hammer in an interesting plot without it feeling rushed or unnatural. The characters can develop and things can occur in a sequence that makes sense without feeling like it's just happening so the bad team can lose before a protagonist's bedtime. This led to an unforgettable story for me, where in spite of there being a lot of characters, each holds a special place in my mind and my heart, either because I love them or I hate them. I've commonly heard people call the game overly edgy, and as much as I do think the story is more mature and there are some edgy moments, the few times where I think the story is too edgy, it is kind of just more funny because it's like, damn, they really wrote that. Most of the time though, I think the emotional moments do just hit and are truly good. And if I'd have to say, this game is a good mix of humor, emotional storytelling, and intriguing mystery, which I think coupled with the generally good writing makes it a great journey that most will enjoy so long as you are okay with the more mature themes that I mentioned before. And one last thing on that, nothing in this game feels forced for emotional shock. Like when things happen, it feels natural, and if they're sad, it feels like, damn, I kind of expected that. Not just like the devs decided, hey, let's kill your best friend so the player has an emotional experience. Also, one thing I should note is the Pokemon Reborn characters are all based off this old Reborn League, which was just a bunch of people that basically did battles against each other and simulated gyms, which is really cool. The videos are actually on YouTube if you want to watch these battles, but honestly, I think a lot of these are just, personas, which I really hope they are, as some of them are really sad. But in general, it makes it kind of interesting because you can kind of look back into the past and see where all of these characters came from. Anyways, that's the story with as few spoilers as I could, though if you want to see the writing done justice with some spoilers that don't fully ruin the main story, you should definitely check out the story analysis I'm doing soon. Self-shill aside, let's get into visuals, since this kind of does matter, especially if you're going to be looking at this game for a long time. These are honestly, in my opinion, pretty good. At first glance, they're not too crazy, obviously, but they're a chill, kind of gritty take on the 2D Pokemon art style. There's so many custom sprites and beautiful backgrounds that utilize 2D insanely well. The character sprites and in-battle models are gorgeous and instantly recognizable, along with there being some cool scenes that occur, and the custom Pokemon variants which look really sick. And custom shinies for each Pokemon, and some of these look crazy, like look at this one. Overall, I'd say the art is really good. It's obviously not cyberpunk, but it doesn't need to be. And for people that love 2D Pokemon, this is high-key peak design, at least for me. Honestly, I'm just a big fan of the little sprites and the battle sprites, especially for cute units like Aya, and she's just like me. Now, visuals aside, how does this game treat your ears? Well, this music, honestly, I didn't expect much, as I don't typically like EDM or dubstep type music. But here the team did an amazing job, especially with the area themes and the Reborn theme, where it's hype but not too overbearing as a lot of dubstep and EDM is usually to me. Just listen to some of the more chill area music here. Then we have some more hype stuff for when insane battles are happening or it's a more tense area. As you can see, they did a great job with a bunch of unique custom tracks, with a good mix of more classical Pokemon musics and some more that include EDM and dubstep inspiration. There were a couple of composers of this, some being the devs themselves, and one notable one being Glitch X City, who posts quite frequently video game remixes, often for Pokemon. So it's pretty obvious why they did such a good job, as they have a ton of practice and clearly have a passion for doing it. And I honestly am really impressed they managed to make me actually like songs outside of my normal genres. So overall, the music is really good, unique, and fitting for the areas it's used in, and the sound design is, well, just standard Pokemon, so there's not much to complain about. But now to finish the video, you've heard why I think it's amazing, and that's good. But I'm obviously a bit biased, and it's important to get the whole story. So here are my personal gripes and common sentiments from players that have problems with the game, so you can have a more complete picture of the positives and the negatives. I think what I would say personally is the first hour or so was a bit slow paced. It was mostly story, not a ton of good battles, but once you hit that first gym, the battles don't stop being fun and get even better as the game goes on. Also, you don't seem to get XP farming trainers till you beat that first gym, so that was a little bit annoying, but to be frank, the XP farming is more important at higher levels, as once you hit like level 50, it's really hard to gain XP, and if you need to get a guy from like level 1 to like level 100, that's more of a hassle than getting it from level 1 to like level 3, Otherwise, I really love the game, and since my gripes with the game are so small, I try to find other people's opinions because, my opinion is so good on the game that it's kind of not giving you any negatives. But obviously, the human mind is so vast, and tastes can vary between person to person, so each individual probably has their own net of likes and dislikes. But for Reborn, there seems to be two main things that people tend to dislike, which I mentioned kind of in part earlier. One thing is some players perceive the game as too edgy, which I mentioned earlier and kind of can understand where they're coming from. The story does have darker elements and covers some sensitive topics, and some of the dialogue can be edgy to a bit of a, absurd degree. However, I think this is tempered by the fact there's always glimmers of light in the world. Good things do happen, good people do exist in this universe, there's tons of humor and enjoyment happening. It's not all dreary and depressed, and even when it goes over the line of being too edgy, it feels almost funny at times, at least to me, especially because it doesn't happen too much. But I will say this will be taste dependent, and my best recommendation is to just try the game. If you like the characters writing at first, then you'll probably love the game, especially if you were attracted to what I said in the gameplay and story section. Another issue I've heard is there are too many characters. Personally, I think this may be more of an issue if you played the game when it was coming out in episodes, so you have to wait a whole year for a new episode of the game to come out. It can be hard to remember all the characters, but since the game's been fully released for a bit, it is a bit less noticeable. Though I will mention, even though it's complete, it is getting some quality of life updates from some of the developers. I personally think, though, this is again taste dependent, as is probably all issues regarding games, but to me, because you have such a big cast, and it's just so visually distinct and have their own personalities, it's easy to remember them. And honestly, even if you don't see them for a while, it feels like, damn, I wonder what these guys were up to while I was doing stuff. And they're usually up to some interesting stuff. And honestly, I just think the characters are so interesting and well written, it's hard to be unhappy having a new one enter the folds. There's always a banger. Even my least favorite characters, I'm happy are in the game and improved my experience. Anyways, those are the two main ones I've seen mentioned multiple times, but there's also some other ones that you may have issues with, like maybe the puzzle difficulty, but frankly, all the puzzles felt pretty solvable for me, and there's obviously guides online if you really are hating them. So from what I've seen, the developers seem like really nice people. Like when I see them engaging with the community and in their dev blogs, they just seem like overall chill, nice people. So it's really easy for me to suggest the game because, I don't know, they made a good game and they seem like good people. But with that, we've gone over everything that I think makes Pokemon Reborn a masterpiece of a game. To be completely honest, every time I think of the game, I got a smile on my face. And I think a lot of love should go out to the team behind it because they made something truly special. If you do try it, which I think you should, please remember the passwords I suggested, and I hope you have a great time. If there's anything you think I missed or disagree or agree with me on, or any really thought you have, just tell me in the comments. I hope you have a nice day.